what we call leadership is being a catalyst. So being that accelerant, being an enabler of change, helping change to happen that would not have happened otherwise. So that's really what I try to do in my writing. It's what I try to do in these groups and teams that I like to build. One of my favorite things is to build and lead small teams.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering catalysts to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations. Today, I'm incredibly excited to have time with Dan Ward. Dan is currently a senior principal systems engineer and innovation catalyst at MITRE Corporation, and he served in the Air Force for more than 20 years in a multitude of innovation roles and retiring at the rank of lieutenant colonel. He then launched Dan Ward Consulting to help clients reduce cost, time, and complexity of delivering world-class innovations. He's published 4 books, putting us to shame: Fire, How Fast, Inexpensive, Restrained, and Elegant Methods Ignite Innovation, The Simplicity Cycle, Lift, Innovation Lessons from Flying Machines. Oh my gosh, I'm excited to read that one too. And Punk, the book I told him I just ordered, cannot wait, it's going to be a Christmas present. Prompts and Provocations for Authentic Innovations. He presents and lectures globally. His writings have appeared in many places like Fast Company, Forbes, Harper's, Boston Globe. I'm sure I'm missing a few, Dan, you can let us know. He has not 1, not 2, but 3 engineering degrees, has received the Bronze Star Medal for his service in Afghanistan. Like, whoa, I bow down. Thank you for being here with me today, Dan.
Tracy, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the lovely introduction and kind words. And I enjoy your show. I'm looking forward to being part of it. So thanks.
All right. Well, then let's have a conversation.
Indeed.
So would love to understand, that was, a quick intro. How do you think about your history, and can you help us see the catalytic moments along the way?
I love the sort of that framing of identifying those catalytic moments along the way of somebody's career trajectory and path. And as I thought about that and getting ready for this, there's maybe 2 or 3 that I might highlight.
Yeah.
One was when I was in the Air Force, when I was in uniform, I was stationed at the Air Force Research Laboratory, tiny little postage stamp of a base in upstate New York. There were like 80 of us in uniform. And one of the things I got to do there was develop or help develop the rapid innovation process for the Air Force Research Lab. So AFRL, the Air Force Research Lab, is chartered to do like fundamental bench level research as well as building prototypes and all of that stuff for military technologies. So communication systems, radar systems, all of that stuff. And so figuring out what is the repeatable process. And not just a repeatable process that we can define, but a repeatable process that practitioners will actually use for the entire Air Force Research Lab with like 10,000 people in like 10 different locations. It was just a delightful opportunity to help kind of really dig in at that practitioner level, get it written down, get it propagated. I'm sure they've updated it since that time, but the impact that had, I think, was much bigger than I had expected at the time. I thought, oh, we'll write down the process, and then people started doing it, and you're like, oh, that was that catalytical moment where you accelerated, you sort of reduced the activation energy required for people to make good stuff happen quickly. So, that was sort of in my day job, like my official responsibilities. The second sort of big catalytical moment, and actually the other 2, were both aside from my day job, which I think is kind of classic for Catalyst, the way you write about it. And your book was so good, by the way. I loved it. I had written a number of articles. I wrote like 80 or 80 plus articles. Before I wrote books, I wrote articles, mostly in like obscure tech, military tech journals that like nobody reads except for this one. So this article, I said basically all the same things that I've been saying for years about speed, thrift, simplicity, and bringing all those to bear on the way we design and develop technology systems. The twist was this one, I used Star Wars as a metaphor for all the same stuff I've been saying, but now the tagline was build droids, not Death Stars. So build droids, not Death Stars was inspired by my daughter. She was the catalyst who really triggered that particular article. They had finally gotten old enough to watch the Star Wars movies. This is when there were only six of them at the time. We watched all six of them, and partway through Empire Strikes Back, one of my daughters said, "Dad, they shouldn't build those Death Stars anymore. They keep getting blown up." And I was like, "Hang on, I'll be right back. Let me go write an article about that." Right? So, uh, fun fact, fun family lore. Both my daughters claim to be the one who said that. Um, Memory is funny. I remember one of them saying that. I won't say which one I think said it, but they think they both said it. And you do seem to be on mute, by the way, if that is on purpose. Okay.
I keep myself on mute so that your audio is the primary, but you know I'm hearing you and
Just in
reacting.
case, just in case. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that article went viral in a way that none of my other stuff had. Rachel Maddow tweeted about it. Like wild. I still hear that came out in, I think, 2011. I still hear from people saying, "Are you the guy who wrote that Star Wars article?" And so the impact that that single article had on shaping the way people see the world and how they how they define goodness, because we do have a tendency to want to build Death Stars, these metaphorical things that are big, expensive, complicated, end up getting blown up in the second act. They contribute less to the fight than they were envisioned because complex systems tend to do less than they were designed to do. Simple systems tend to do more than they were designed to do. Getting that concept into people's heads in a way that was digestible and memorable, and it became the kind of thing that people would be like, "Oh, you got to read this." They would tell somebody about it and pass it along. That's how it got out of this obscure, DoD journal and into like Rachel Maddow's desk? Like, how does that happen? What?
And is it
Um,
featured in any of your books? I'm curious.
um, all of my books
Yeah.
do tend to have a lot of pop culture references.
Yeah.
That's sort of part of my
So
voice, my
will
vibe
that
as a writer.
stay as an article, or is that going to become its own book one day?
So the basic concepts and practices in that
Yeah.
article became the foundation for my first book, Fire,
That makes sense.
which is all about speed, thrift, and simplicity.
Yep.
The concept of build droids, not Death Stars. I'm like, this is the book length treatment of that concept is book
Perfect.
number one. That was Fire.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well done, daughter that's nameless.
It's one of the two. It was definitely one of the two. So, and then the third sort of catalytic moment, more recent. So this is after I retired from the Air Force and when I was first joined MITRE. One of the coolest things I've ever done, if I do say so myself. I started a group called the Green Pen Squad. And I'm new to the company. MITRE is 10,000 people in 60 different locations. And I just wanted to find my people. I wanted to find who are the frustrated innovators, who are the energetic people who are trying to make a difference. And I just needed to find some people to know and to work with. So I launched what I called the Green Pen Squad because green means go, green means good, green means growth. And I bought a bunch of green pens and I wandered around and I talked to people and we'd have a quick coffee together. And if I got a sense like, oh, yeah, they may be one of these people, I would offer them a green pen. And I would say, would you like to join my green pen squad? Because when I'm writing with green ink, it's a visual reminder to think differently. It's not black ink, it's not blue, it's green. It's a social signal. Hey, that guy writes in green ink. That's a little different. That's a little weird. And so once a month, plus or minus, we had this sort of very casual, informal co-mentoring group that we evolved into, where we would have a chance to test out our ideas and give each other presentations and just sort of ask questions and we really sort of built a nice little experimental, collaborative, innovative, catalytic community. Um, One of the spin-offs from the Green Pen Squad became the MITRE Innovation Toolkit, which is a product. It's a free product since MITRE is I should tell people what MITRE is in just a second. Don't let me forget to do that. But MITRE's Innovation Toolkit is a free resource. You can go to itk.mitre.org and you get access to the whole thing. We don't even ask for your email address. Like you can just use it all. It's 26, 28 different tools and techniques and methods that are designed to help people work together more effectively to deliver innovative solutions to hard problems. Everything from like understanding what your problem is to exploring the solution space. We've got analytical tools, we've got ideation tools, understanding your user, journey maps, tools for simplifying, tools for going divergent thinking, and tools for convergent thinking. For each of the tool pages, there's a description of what is the tool, when would you use this one versus some other? Why would you use this one versus some other? Step-by-step instructions on how to use it. Free downloads. There's no software to download. There's like templates and things like that. And that project was launched by 4 or 5 of us from the Green Pen Squad, who were like, we should make a thing. I want to make something. What could we make? And 6 years later, we have, I think, 44 certified ITK facilitators across the company in 14 different locations. I can't even name all the locations anymore. I used to be able to have lunch with the whole ITK team. Now I haven't even met everybody. And yeah, we've used these innovation tools with general officers in the Pentagon, with senior executives at NASA, and with high school kids. I was just off at a university recently doing an ITK workshop there as well. And so just 5 people getting together over lunch. We had no time, no money, it wasn't an official project. It's still not an official project. Nobody has ever been assigned to work on this ITK project. We've all just sort of self-selected. We're volunteers who are like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing. And we turn it into products and services that people actually pay for. So
What does the
yeah, that's,
ITK stand for?
oh, ITK stands for Innovation Toolkit.
That's it. Just that
Yep,
makes
that's it.
perfect sense.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So you told me to tell people what MITRE is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, I work for a company called MITRE. For those who haven't heard of it, MITRE is a not-for-profit systems engineering company, which is sort of a rare thing. There aren't a lot of engineering companies that are not-for-profit. We are chartered to work in the public interest, and our mission is to solve problems to make the world a safer place. So we often provide the deeper level of technical expertise that the government can't or doesn't have in-house. We're kind of serve as the government's trusted advisor. By statute, we can't make products, and we don't compete with Boeing and Lockheed or Deloitte or any of those. We can make prototypes that we can then share. We can do things like the innovation toolkit and kind of put that out into the world. So we do a lot of cybersecurity work, a lot of national security work, a lot of work with HHS, so Health and Human Services. So we're in like healthcare policy, technology, big data. And really what we do is we run 6 of these federally funded research and development corporations, or FFRDCs. We love our acronyms, right?
Yeah, indeed. I'm given that.
So, yeah. So these FFRDCs, federally funded research and development corporations, I think is the C. It's just a way for the government to, give us money to go off and solve these hard problems, with um, in an objective way. So we're just here to kind of be the trusted advisor and the honest broker, analyzing technologies and things like that, without actually like having that profit pressure or stake, stockholders and things like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I know that that's going to be meaningful. It's such a purpose-driven place to be.
It's very purpose-driven, very mission-driven, which one of the things I
Yeah.
love about it. Yeah.
I can imagine. And I have all kinds of follow-ups from your 3 moments that you shared, but I'd love to ask first, how do you personally relate to the concept of catalyst, and how does it support you as a leader, if at all?
So, I think being a catalyst, I mean, in chemistry, catalysts accelerate change, right? You introduced a catalyst into a solution, and what does that do? Is it reduces the activation energy and it makes the chemical reaction go faster.
Yeah.
Um, I think so much of what we call leadership is being a catalyst. So being that accelerant, being an enabler of change, helping change to happen that would not have happened otherwise. So that's really what I try to do in my writing. It's what I try to do in these, groups and teams that I like to build. One of my favorite things is to build and lead small teams. Build and co-lead, I should say. I like to build teams with a shared leadership structure. So the Green Pen Squad didn't have I wasn't I wasn't leading I was organized, I was catalyzing it, right? And similarly with the Innovation Toolkit team project, we've got a leadership team of about 6 people, and it's very egalitarian and very kind of anybody can make any decision that they want as long as you just sort of inform the rest of us, ask for advice occasionally. But sparking those teams, bringing people together and saying, "Hey, you want to try this? What do you think about doing that?" Um, Helping make things happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise is kind of what catalyst means to me.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful definition. And I see that in each of the moments in your history that you share. And when you talk about the Star Wars article, right, you really show us that moment. You're watching the movie, you're with your girls, and like the dots connect, and you run, and you have to, kind of put out what has synthesized for you. And so I'm curious, in the first example, I think you called it a rapid innovation method. Forgive me if I got it wrong.
Innovation process. Yep.
Up the process. Sorry. So what spawned that? I'm curious.
Ooh. Um, in a word, I think people spawned
Okay.
it. Like we had a perfect storm of just the right people. So we had a senior person at the lab who had the vision. He's like, hey, I think the AFRL could go faster. I think we need to ramp up our capacity as a laboratory to accelerate this innovation work. And then he found me and a few other sort of junior officers who had been doing the thing,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't quite know how to scale up. He knew how to scale up, but needed help at the practitioner level to do the thing. So that partnership, I think, was really well. That was sort of their chemical reaction began to happen.
And
Um,
was it him who was like, "Hey, we need this repeatable process," or did it come from the people coming together?
a little bit of both. I think the thing that he wanted to have happen is a bit different than what actually did happen because it evolved. And as we
Right.
sort of, we learned more. Day one is when you know the least about the project, right?
Yep.
So he's like, hey, I think we want this thing. We're going to make these networks. And we're like, all right, we're going to start there. But by the time we take step two, step three, step four, we're going to be heading in a slightly different direction. So I think we hit the bullseye, which maybe wasn't the bullseye that he was aiming at initially.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a very collaborative, exploratory, experimental approach to defining this process, which really got to all of our skill set as lab rats, right? We're working in the lab. We're all about doing experiments. Well, boy, let's experiment with how we do experiments. Let's innovate on the way we do innovation.
Yeah.
And yeah, that mutual trust and the egalitarian nature. He was much more senior than some of us junior folks who were working with him, but it was all very yeah, very egalitarian, which doesn't always happen in a military environment. Happens more often than people think. We can kind of leave our rank at the door more often than you might think,
Okay.
but it's not a guarantee that that'll be the case.
There was something you and I were talking about before I hit record,
Mm.
and I won't have us go into it completely, but you brought up this notion of the confidence paradox, right? In
Oh
a
yeah.
just a short element, the idea that often we will resist getting started because we don't yet have the confidence, and the paradox being that the confidence gains when you get started, right? So that we can stall. Something I'm hearing in both that first and third story you share is that there's other people that were really part of what you were doing. You were, an element, a chemical element as a catalyst,
Mm,
handing out the green pens, recognizing
yes.
people. But, the ITK came from the brain trust, that the, repeatable process came from the people coming together. So I would love to just have you talk a little bit about what it is you think an innovation that is the individual, what it is in innovation that's the group, and any advice you have for folks out there.
I think that's where the catalyst metaphor really works so powerfully. Because, I mean, again, in chemistry, if you just have a jar of catalyst sitting by itself, nothing happens, right? It's inert, right?
Yeah.
So a catalyst by themselves is just some powder in a jar. The the actual chemical reaction only happens when that catalyst is in contact with the other elements, right? The water and the reactants and things like that. So yeah, I mean, when I look at I don't think I've done anything ever in my career and otherwise that didn't involve other people.
Mhm.
So that's why I said catalysm and leadership go together, partly because like the people aspect of it. If you're a leader all by yourself and you don't have anybody following you, you're not a leader, right? Leaders require
Mhm.
followers, catalysts require reactants and other pieces of that puzzle. So yeah, I think the catalyst's role, if you want to sort of find yourself in that position, I want to be a catalyst. Um, which maybe was a weird aspiration, but I am a catalyst. I sort of recognize it. That's how I show up. Well, you got to find some chemicals to go react with, and that's like with the Green Pen Squad, where I just wandered around like, hey, who wants to take one of these green pens and meet with me next Wednesday? And it's unofficial, and we're just going to kind of eat lunch together and talk and get to know each other, and maybe we'll make something cool, someday. Um, those are the people who are like, oh, I'll join that chemical reaction.
Yeah. And I would imagine, the rate of imposter syndrome is high for any human. And in the catalyst population, we see it a lot because catalysts tend to want to go do new and different things and solve new challenges. And so by definition, then they are stepping into places where they have very low competence again and again and again. Right.
Yes.
And so it sounds like one of the ways that you have learned that can really help catalysts through that moment is don't see it as a me.
Right.
That if you
Yeah.
always go in knowing that I love that, like, I'm just a jar of powder. If I'm just the catalyst sitting alone, right? That it
Right.
has to be in conjunction with others, and that as you talked about the repeatable process, it will evolve from that initial idea with the people that become part of it.
Yeah. So let me pull two threads there.
Yeah.
First the idea of um, confidence and imposter syndrome. If we base our imposter syndrome on our competence, on like our skills and the things that then of course we have imposter syndrome. None of us are as competent as we would like to be.
Yeah.
But if we instead frame our identity as like, I have accepted the challenge, that's just true. That's just something that I can decide is true. I have now accepted the challenge, and I am a person who has accepted the challenge.
Yeah.
There's no imposter syndrome around that. Like you haven't even begun applying yourself. You haven't started taking the classes yet or learning and honing your skills yet. Even before that, you can still say, I am somebody who has accepted the challenge to do that, and I'm going to go sign up for that class, or I'm going to get
Yeah.
my guitar and do the rehearsal, and I'm going to, gain these skills, right? But there's no imposter syndrome around accepting the challenge because that's just entirely a decision of a moment,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then, when we talk about people and bringing people together, I think one of the big barriers is failure, and this gets into the imposter syndrome as well. Oh, I tried it and it failed. It didn't work out, and so now I have even worse imposter syndrome. So, learning to learn from failure is, I think, a key to dealing with all of this. And so, the ITK team, the Innovation Toolkit team, we have an amazing practice around this, and it's called Failure Cake.
Failure cake.
Failure Cake.
Okay.
Yep. So Failure Cake is about what it sounds like. And it started our team early days. We had no time, no money, no resources. We had put in a pitch to try and get some funding to go turn ITK into something real, and we didn't get funded. Oh, we were crushed. We had really put all our hopes into this, and we thought we did a great job, and we worked really hard, and they didn't give us any funding. So the next day, one of our teammates shows up with a cake. And on the cake, she had written "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," a little Taylor Swift lyric, always a good idea. And we sat around at lunchtime that day and we ate that cake together. And what did that do for us? It destigmatized the failure. It took some of the sting out because it's hard to be too sad if you're eating cake because cake is delicious. We love cake. As we ate the cake, we talked about what did we attempt? What did we accomplish? What did we learn? What might we do differently next time? So this is a way to socialize through the failure. It was kind of celebratory, but what we were not celebrating the failure, right? Failure sucks. We hate failure. Nobody wants to fail. What we were celebrating was the attempt. You guys, it is worth celebrating that we tried. It is worth celebrating that we took a swing. Hey, it didn't work out. All right, well, fine, but we're still going to celebrate the attempt. So the team eventually developed one of our slogans is the worst thing that can happen is we get cake.
Oh my
The
God.
worst thing that can happen
So
is we get
good.
cake. Do you know how bold that team will be? We will try anything with no assurance of outcomes. Like we're just going to try it because, hey, if it doesn't work out, at least we get cake. And cake is delicious
Mhm.
and we love cake.
Oh
So
my
this has become a
gosh.
regular part of our practice where anytime we try something that doesn't work out, we get a cake and we talk about it and we learn from it. And we define failure, and we do use the F word, pardon my language, but we do use the F word. I think it's important to use the F word. Um, we define failure as, when effort does not produce the desired results, right? Effort does not produce the desired results. We're not talking about blame. We're just recognizing, hey, we put in some effort and we didn't get the results we wanted. We're going to call that a failure.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the story. It's not the whole story. I am not the failure. Like, it's not an identity. It's an experience. And people have said, oh, don't call it a failure cake, call it a learning cake. And I'm like, we do learn from our failures, but calling it a learning cake, I feel it kind of misses the point. Like,
Right.
we want to call it a failure because we want to deal with reality. We want to deal with the data. Most of us are all engineers on this particular team. I think data matters. So failure cake is a way to help us learn to learn from failure. We do another version of failure cake. It comes in a couple flavors. Or set up a cake, or we do cupcakes these days because it's just easier to, you don't have to cut them. We get a big table and a big whiteboard in a public place and a bunch of little yellow stickies. And as people are walking past, like, hey, free cupcake. Would you like a free cupcake? All you got to do is write down a short failure story on one of these yellow stickies and put it up on our whiteboard over here. And very quickly, the whiteboard fills up and we sit around and we eat the cupcake and we read everybody's failure stories. And we're like, oh, I'm not the only one who fails. Everybody has a failure story. And oh, that one's funny. And oh, that one's sad. And oh, I'm glad that wasn't me. And oh my gosh, that happened to me too. And what that does to the culture of that space, as you're sort of standing shoulder to shoulder, we each have a cupcake. I may not know you, but we can have a conversation about failure. I mean, it's been a game changer. And the good news is anybody can do it.
That's right.
Whose permission do you need to do that? You can just show up and do it in a public space somewhere and see what happens.
No funding necessary. Yet Shannon and I have been working with a particular client, helping their workforce embrace their value of innovation, because it's a little opaque for folks. And at the last in-person workshop we ran, we had the senior executives share their failure resumes.
Oh, I love it.
Right. So like going back to like, I got kicked out of law school, or, or like all these different things, but how each, like, what was it that allowed them to pivot toward that next thing? So I love the failure story and cupcake wall idea. That's fantastic.
So, and the failure wall with the cupcakes is just, yeah, it's a remarkable. We do that with classes sometimes. We've been known to just sort of set it up in the cafeteria, or just a public hallway, and just be like, let's see. And every time the wall fills up really fast, and some amazing conversations happen.
Amazing. Thank you. You've been sharing so much wisdom. And so I want to pivot to give you a moment. You have 4 books that exist in the world. And so I'm curious, and you mentioned earlier kind of, thrift and speed. What are some of the things that you feel the most compelled to bring to the world in terms of lessons learned around innovation?
Oh, that's a great question. When I started I'm an engineer by training, but I started writing.
3 degrees.
Right, yeah. True. I started writing just as a way to kind of test my own ideas and just like put them on paper and hold them up to the light and be like, is this true? Can I justify? Can I do the math publicly and get specific about it? And then I eventually kind of figured out, hey, I'm not just writing a series of articles. I'm writing a book, one article at a time. I kept coming back to these same themes of speed, thrift, and simplicity. That innovation doesn't have to cost so much or take so long or be so complicated. And then issues of like communications and dealing with complexity and learning from failure, all of these things. And, I realized like I kind of wanted to do a book length treatment of the topic. So the books are not like a assembly of the articles. It's all new stuff. But I realized like there is such a thing as a writer, as like a book author, like that exists. I didn't know any other book authors, but I thought, that could maybe be me. What if I tried that? And as a writer, like the voice that I try to bring in my writing has 3 main points. I want to be personal, practical, and funny. So as a writer, that's what I want my voice to sound like: personal, practical, and funny. I want it to be clear that like this is me. There I was. This is what I did. This is what I saw. I use the first person pronouns. I write about I was there. This is what I did. Practical. I want it to be people like, oh, I could do that. Here's some step-by-step instructions, or here's some prompts to kind of get you thinking. And then funny, I hope people get a chuckle. I hope it makes them laugh and think this stuff should be fun. And I know like when I write something, if it doesn't sound right, it's probably because I missed one of those 3. So that's been a piece of it. I'm just wanting to kind of share and contribute to the larger conversation that my profession is having. I think that's an obligation of every professional. If you are a professional, you're in some profession, law, medicine, engineering, whatever. Um, we all have an obligation to contribute to the conversation that the profession is having. And if you're not sure what conversation your profession is having, read, right? Go read and see what are the questions people are wrestling with, what are the problems, what are the friction points. And as I read more, I was like, oh, I've got something to say on that problem, on that theme, on that whatever. Um, and yeah, 4 books later. So
Well, thank you for the contributions that you've made. And thank you for the call to action. I think that's amazing for all folks out there and definitely to this catalytic audience of what is the contribution that you're making to the field that you sit in.
speaking of call to action, let me do my quick book math for everybody.
Yeah.
See, I think people should write books for the same reason they should get advanced degrees. You're going to learn a lot along the way. You'll have fun if you do it right. You're going to meet some really interesting people, and you get a nice credential that you can point to and be like, hey, this is a thing that boosts my street cred. Right. So people should write books. Whether your book is worth reading or not, that's a whole other question, right? Books are worth writing.
That's
So
hilarious.
here's my book math. My first book was about 50,000 words. 50,000 words is a good length for a nonfiction business book. 500 words at a sitting is a reasonable amount of words to write in a single sitting. Half an hour to an hour, you can generally get 500 words onto a piece of paper in that time frame in a single sitting. 500 words per sitting. Here's my engineer doing public math. 500 words per sitting. 100 sittings gets you to your 50,000 words.
Look at
So that
that.
means you got to sit down 100 times, write 500 words. There's your first manuscript. If you do that once a week, your book is done in 2 years. Twice a week, your book's done in 1 year. So if twice a week you can sit down and write 500 words, you got 50,000 words by the end of the year. 3 times a week, and it's 8 months, and you can kind of do the math from there. But I say that to kind of like sort of scope out like
To make it
how much
achievable.
does it really
Yeah.
take to write a book? And a year or two, that's comparable to a degree. And more people have degrees than have written books, at least sort of in my space. So a book sort of stands out a little bit more in terms of that credential. Yeah, they're fun. Again, I learned so much doing it. You'll meet some interesting people along the way. There's my recommendation, my call to action. People should write
Thank
books.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. We don't have a lot of folks talk about that process, so that's really helpful.
Sure.
Okay. So you mentioned a little bit for, kind of a passing comment of how the military can be different as we think about innovation. So I'm so curious, can you share one or two of the biggest challenges you've faced as a Catalyst leader, specifically in your 20 years in the military?
Yeah. Boy, there were several. Where to begin? The failure thing was certainly a challenge. Like, how do we deal with failure honestly and openly in a way that we learn from it in an environment where the consequences are life or death? Right. When I talk about failure cake, I will be a little playful and a little glib and sometimes, but we're talking about medicine or military, like life or death consequences. I think in those situations, we need failure cake even more because the consequences are so significant of these failures. We need to have mechanisms that allow us to talk about them and process them and learn from them. Because the alternative is to deny that it was really a failure and then to fail to learn from it. And then guess what? We're going to repeat it. So helping people kind of, again, that activation energy that's required to get over the hump to be like, no, failure's not an option. Failure's always an option. Whether we admit it or not, then let's go ahead and admit it and let's deal with the reality that sometimes failures happen and let's make sure we learn from it. So in the Air Force, we often call that a hot wash. So after the event, we kind of do the thing and we do a quick hot wash to say, how did that go? What did we learn from it? So that was a piece of it. I think I come from a tech-centric world and I often find that communication skills or the lack thereof is a huge barrier to making stuff happen. And I say communication skills really specifically because that's transmit and receive, right? Transmit and receive from a sort of a radio type. So that's storytelling and listening. Active listening skills are a vastly underdeveloped skill set in so many people, not just the military. Like, I wish there was the equivalent of Toastmasters for listening. Right? We have Toastmasters that'll teach you how to get up in front of a crowd and say some words. Where's the equivalent of Toastmasters for active listening skills? I'm not sure that that quite exists. Improv might be a close area because to really do good improv, and frankly, most improv is terrible, but really good improv, I should say most improv isn't funny. It's really hard to do like funny improv, but really good improv involves like listening closely and being attentive to the person sharing the stage with you and receiving the gift and then building on it. So improv will teach you some of those listening skills. But yeah, storytelling and listening skills. If I could wave a magic wand and give everybody those, oh, the world would be such a better place.
Were you naturally good at both of storytelling and active listening, or did you have your own journey?
I certainly had my own journey. And I was a magician when I was a kid. I worked my way through high school and college doing magic shows for birthday parties, libraries, hospitals. So I kind of grew up on stage.
Yeah.
So I think I had a natural, well, I had training from an early age of standing in front of a group of people and saying words. I think the listening is just a harder skill to learn because we're not often taught.
Yeah.
But when I realized, like, oh, that is a thing that matters a lot, there are ways to learn how to listen. There's books on that kind of stuff and ways to practice. Um, so yeah,
How did you learn?
how did I learn? I'll have to come up with some of the books and titles.
You read books.
I read a lot of books.
Yeah.
Yes, I read a lot of books, and I like once people pointed out that like, hey, listening skills are really important, I began to notice like, oh, that person is not a good listener, and therefore people don't follow them. That person is a really good listener, and people follow the heck out of them, right? And just seeing the impact and finding those models. So books and finding the role models who demonstrate the skills and abilities that I wanted to adopt. Um, and if anybody's looking for a tip on how to become a better listener, it's not terribly hard. Um, Increase the number of questions you ask by like a factor of 10. Like just ask, or by a factor of 2, ask the next question. When somebody says something, respond by, tell me more about that. Like even just as simple as tell me more about that. And then shut up and let them tell you more, right?
That's a key part. It's so you said something that's so piquing to me that like look and you started to notice that people followed the good listeners, which is a little counterintuitive in our culture. And certainly my imaginings of the military, I kind of think of the military as the place to bark orders.
Right.
And
20 years, I
so-
never gave an order. I don't think I ever gave an order my entire military career.
That's so interesting that people follow leaders who listen. Thank you. All right. As sad as I am to be here, because I want to talk to you all day. As we wrap up, I get to my final question, but it is my favorite question.
Excellent.
I'd love to hear your favorite catalyst, past or present, who inspires you and why they stand out.
All right. So my favorite catalyst is a guy named Octave Chanute.
Octave?
Octave Chanute, right? So I love him because he has a really cool name. So he was a civil engineer and a railroad engineer in the late 1800s, 1880s, 1890s. And having made his impact and his fortune doing railroads at a time when railroads were like the internet of the age, he shifted over to explore aviation. So that's like a modern, internet billionaire doing rockets. He was a railroad engineer, a railroad millionaire who went into airplanes. And so he did several things that I think were just brilliant. He studied everything that anybody had ever done in the field of aviation. And these are like 20 years prior to the Wrights having their first successful flight, 1903. He brought people together. He studied their experiments. He studied their failures. He published a book in 1894 called Progress in Flying Machines, which when Wilbur Wright went to the Smithsonian and said, hey, my brother and sister and I, we want to build a flying machine. What book should we read? The Smithsonian was like, Chanute's book. Because Progress in Flying Machines documented 400 years of failed aviation experiments. Everything anybody had ever tried, he wrote it down and with his engineering discipline, his engineering mind, analyzed it. And he could identify this is a dead end. Stop gluing feathers on your wings. Stop flapping wings. Those are not going to get us off the ground. Fixed wings with no feathers glued onto them. That's probably the promising path. That's the way to go. And then he built hardware and he did flight tests of his own with gliders. So he was a connector, he was a learner, he was a teacher, and he was a builder, all 4 of these, and he advanced the field in just magnificent ways. So that's the model that I try to follow. I want to be a connector, I want to be a learner, I want to be a teacher, and I want to be a builder. Not a lot of people kind of hit all 4 of those. So he's my aspirational catalyst that I try to exemplify or try to imitate. And he's one of the main characters in my 3rd book, Lift, which looks at aviation pioneers prior to the Wrights.
Well, getting to have this conversation, Dan, it feels really clear to me that you hit all 4 really beautifully. And I have to say, I really appreciate that every time you're teaching, you do it in a way that's so succinct. Like to what you say you bring in your book, that element of simplicity, right? Like I feel like people can listen to this conversation and take away so many actionable ways to go and feel more effective as well as more connected in what they're going to be doing in the world.
Well, I hope so. Again, if I'm aiming for personal, practical, and funny, that practical piece is really important to me, that people hear this or read or whatever, and be like, oh, I can go do something a little bit different because of what I just learned here. So I hope people go off and do this failure cake thing at the very least.
For sure. And the failure wall. I'm all in.
Yeah.
Thank you for the time today. This has been a joy for me.
Tracy, this has been a blast. Thank you so much. Great questions.
Thanks. I try to do the listening. I do try.
It was terrific. Yeah, I love it.
And thank you so much to our listening audience. If you'd like to learn more about how to create bold, powerful change in the world, you can check out any one of Dan's 4 books, or check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out, or go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. Because we know you enjoyed this episode as much as I have, take a few seconds to rate it on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and hit the share button for the other catalysts in your life. Thanks again.